Hi, this is Kim Coleman-Madsen, Ed Mills, and John Davey with the FirstNet Colorado team. We'd like to present you this webinar on the information we provided to FirstNet on September 30th around the coverage objectives and data collection in support of the future FirstNet network. Today we're going to go over FirstNet's tentative timeline, our submission to FirstNet, including coverage specifications, survey results, and demand forecasts, and the next steps you or your agency can take in this process with us. So the first thing we want to discuss at a high level is the scope of our response as it relates to the FirstNet RFP. As of the date of this webinar, which is December 14th, 2015, FirstNet actually plans to release their RFP in the first or second week of January. Although this timeline, which was provided by FirstNet previously, shows RFP proposals due by May 31st, we actually anticipate they may require proposals be due by April 30th instead. The information that we're going to be going over in this webinar will actually be in some portion released or as provided as part of the RFP and then available for review in what's called the bidder's library for any potential offers or partners to the FirstNet RFP. This gives you a quick high-level view of all of the information on the left-hand side that FirstNet asked us to provide, and then on the right-hand side through checkboxes and across the top, you'll see we provided them in various formats: template spreadsheets, surveys, CAD or computer-aided dispatch incident data, operational areas, our coverage objectives, and then the demand forecast. And then this also gives you elements of our response, but more of a description on the far right side, including the number of pages of data that we provided. FirstNet received about 15 gigabytes of data, and Colorado provided them 1 gigabyte, or about 1/15 of the entire data set they received for the entire country. And so we're pleased that we were able to provide them such a robust response on behalf of Colorado stakeholders. And this is an additional just explanation of the elements of our submission.
So just the highlights on the coverage specification and how we really came up with the coverage in this slide deck, our methodology and the facts behind the methodology. Data sources we used to begin with came from FirstNet. They gave us 5 separate data sources that resulted in a map of proposed coverage that we really felt was inadequate. This is just a map to show you the elevation in Colorado, and the dark green areas, the greener it gets, shows you the lower elevations, and the wider it gets represents higher elevations in the state. And then we show you the morphology, and you can see the color scheme with dense urban in red, and you can see the urban in orange, and you can see the definitions there and how we came up with those. Yellow is the suburban. Green is outlining the rural cluttered, and then the last one is rural open, which you'll see we did include because there are a lot of people that go into our high countries. There may not be people that live at these elevations, but there are definitely folks there experiencing all that Colorado has to offer. And then this map represents the morphology of how we think Colorado needs to be covered. Largely, it is rural open, but you will see along the Front Range, dense urban, urban and suburban, and the rural cluttered, which are sporadically throughout every county in the entire state. And the population is everywhere, but as I said earlier, they're not always living there, but they are there from time to time.
The next thing we want to step through are the data sources that were used to provide a comprehensive coverage objectives submission to FirstNet. FirstNet provided 5 initial data sources around sets that we're going to step through quickly. One of them was high-risk areas, which we believe are critical infrastructure, other areas of concern for law enforcement and public safety responders. The next developed area is the National Land Census, National Land Clutter database showing developed areas. The next one is census blocks, which basically comes from the census that's done every 10 years and represents where people live and work. Highways and traffic counts. and then railroads. So this is what FirstNet provided originally to propose to the states, that if states did not provide them an alternative solution or an alternative proposal for coverage objectives, that FirstNet would use these data sets as a baseline, and that would be baseline through the entire country, and the 6 states and territory, or the 6 territories are protected. 6 territories, excuse me. The next slide shows you transit, which was the last data set. We believe this transit area actually represents probably just the light rail and doesn't represent all of the transit clearly in the entire state. So as a result of all of those data sets, this is the coverage that FirstNet proposed to Colorado. As I mentioned, that if Colorado did not provide an alternative proposal, that this is what would go in that RFP we mentioned at the beginning of this session. This specification covers about 97% of the population, but only about 24% of the area of Colorado. We believe this was wholly inadequate, and so we stepped through an additional pretty comprehensive analysis of where we think coverage should be provided eventually in the public safety broadband network. So our additional data sets included a number of other complementary data sets. We looked at CAD incidents, or computer-aided dispatch incidents. We received about a 46% response rate from Colorado's 96 PSAPs. Those depicted in green are local agencies, and those depicted in blue came from the Colorado State Patrol across all of their 5 PSAPs in the state. In both the Northwest Colorado and in the San Luis Valley, they dispatched for local agencies there as well. This represents about 2.2 million records. We asked PSAPs to provide us about 1 year's worth of data, and we were able to turn a subset of those into geo-validated points, which is what you see represented here. As I mentioned, we had a number of responses from across the state. We are appreciative of those responses, and if your agency or PSAP did not yet participate, we actually would take this data, as we do believe this is an ongoing process, and additional data will only support our efforts. The Colorado State Patrol dispatches for a number of state agencies, as well as wilderness-oriented or federal organizations. You'll see those there. And then on this next slide, you'll see the local agencies they dispatch for that were captured in terms of CAD incidents. The Office of Information Technology that we work in, they have a GIS team, and that team works with local governments to capture the civic addresses, or every address that I believe can receive U.S. Postal Service is captured as an address point. You'll notice that there are some counties, largely along the Eastern Plains, that don't have that data available. It does not mean that we weren't able to provide a robust coverage proposal for FirstNet, though this is just an additional data set that informs the overall response. Recreation in Colorado is a huge activity and of huge importance, not only to the economy, but to public safety's response and understanding why public safety has to go in those areas where a lot of people tend to visit but don't live. So you'll see these recreation areas captured here. They are state, local, and federal recreation areas. Transportation infrastructure, it's an additional source we believe is a little more comprehensive than what FirstNet proposed. And then additional national, state, and county roads. We also did an intersection of the existing coverage for portable and mobile, land mobile radio system, coverage on the digital trunk radio system. So we don't suppose that we don't pretend that there aren't other radio systems in the state, in the metro area, out in some rural areas, that they don't necessarily use the 800 megahertz system. But this is information we had quickly and at hand that we were able to incorporate into our data set response, as FirstNet had an aggressive timeline of September 30th. We will also continue to confirm what other radio coverage might exist, so this data set can be added to as well. This is an intersection of the talk-in and talk-out coverage, so talking into the network and the network talking out to the mobile or portable devices. And so our conclusions were essentially that by survey and then as supported by the data sets, the coverage is the most important unmet need, and it really is the largest barrier to adoption for the future public safety broadband network. This is a composite of all of those sources that we've stepped through previously, and this will show you on this next slide a percentage of of a phased approach to coverage, which we'll step through in just a moment, and that we've proposed alternatively to FirstNet, where they proposed about 24% coverage, geographic coverage across the state. We've proposed about 97% geographic coverage across the state by the end of the phased approach. And that's in the counties, and then 99.9% in the tribal areas. Keep in mind that this is not what the coverage would look like on day one when the network is turned on. We know it will take a number of years to achieve this coverage, but we do believe we have a factual basis to support our proposal. And then this is the difference in the gap between, or the difference in between what FirstNet proposed and what Colorado countered with. So quickly, we're going to step through the phases of deployment. This is going to describe to you on this graph what Colorado proposes in 3 phases of deployment. First, I want to explain our methodology just a little bit on those previous data sets. We essentially, if any of those data sets resulted in a point that fell in a 1 by 1 mile square grid in the state of Colorado, we turned that grid on, which is how we came up with the coverage map. So taking subsets of those data sets, we now, if you look under on the left, what it includes, we looked at roads in phase 1, incidents, recreation areas, and then deployment, a limited deployment approach in the dense urban and suburban areas, and I'll explain that in just a moment. Phase 2, we looked at additional morphologies, we looked at the clutter data, high-risk areas, and filling out the existing footprint of the land mobile radio system. Those 2 first phases result in 45% in each phase, with a total of 90% of the sites deployed. And then in phase 3, we try to round out all of those areas that weren't covered. It's an additional approximately 10% of the sites. Each phase also has a robust deployable solution. If you look at the bottom bullet in each section, we propose deployables with adequate fuel to be strategically placed in phase 1 within a 4-hour response, phase 2 within a 2-hour response within the state, and phase 3, it would be an a la carte menu of deployables like vehicles, man packs, drones or unmanned aerial vehicles, or could be a site on wheels or a cell on wheels, those sorts of things. We really want an agency at that point to be able to identify what they need and request deployment of it quickly. To step through phase 1, we want to explain our approach as it relates to the limited deployment in dense urban and suburban. So if you look at this phase 1 map, you'll notice that many of the metro areas in the Denver metro area, Colorado Springs, and even Grand Junction to a degree, it lacks any coverage. I want to take a step back and explain to you the reason behind this. So FirstNet, as part of their value proposition to anyone who chooses to partner with them to build a network, is to sell the excess spectrum capacity to that partner or partners for use. So what that means is day-to-day public safety in a localized across the network, may use anywhere from 5 to 10 to 20% of the capacity on a given cell. And there would be anywhere from 80 to 95% capacity left unused at any given moment. The technology now allows for FirstNet to partner with that carrier and make that capacity or that spectrum available for that commercial carrier's use, likely for the general public. And then at the moment where public safety may have a localized incident on a cell sector, then public safety would have the ability to use that spectrum. The ability for the commercial carriers' users to access that same spectrum would be degraded or diminished for a period of time while public safety has priority. So by virtue of that, what we call monetizing of the spectrum, we expect that anybody that FirstNet partners with will deploy in the urban, suburban, and dense urban areas in any given city across the country, because that is how they will monetize the spectrum most quickly. That means that we chose to propose to FirstNet and their partners that they deploy in the rural areas as a priority for Colorado, with the expectation that any partner that they select would be deploying by default automatically in order to monetize the spectrum in the urban, suburban, or dense urban areas. The next phase represents really how we jump from phase 1 to phase 2, and we try to cover most of the morphologies, most of the land mobile radio footprint, and most everything else that we consider important. And then phase 3 really is just kind of a more comprehensive deployable and then some more capacity. So the depth of coverage, we proposed to FirstNet that they give us two types of coverage. The first one being in-building coverage, understanding that that coverage does not need to be as significant. The data or the mobile, the upload and download speeds, if you'll notice at 640 kilobits per second down and 64 up on a handheld device, that speed is with the idea that it could support some basic voice. It likely supports some SMS texting, and that would be in buildings in the dense urban, suburban, and rural cluttered areas. There aren't any buildings in the rural open areas we anticipate that would require coverage. So the thought process behind this is that we know we are going to get better coverage than this by virtue of the design that a commercial carrier would be providing, especially as they support the sharing of the spectrum and the excess capacity or the use of that in the dense urban, and suburban, and rural cluttered areas. The other capacity requirement we gave them was around the equipment that will be in responders' vehicles, the rooftop antenna and vehicle-mounted user equipment, and that's across all of the morphologies. There we like to see a 10% down, 1% up, or 10 megabyte down, 1 megabyte up, and the reason that capacity or that bandwidth speed is so large is because we expect those vehicles to be connected to the network and then provide localized Wi-Fi hotspots where coverage may be harder to get out in the situation above with a handheld device. Now, all of these we're attempting to achieve, especially in the in-building coverage, the 90% probability of area of coverage in a building at that speed. And so that's how we know across all of those morphologies that really it is going to be an easy metric for FirstNet to achieve in the totality of the network in Colorado. So these graphs actually depict what I've just tried to describe previously. If you'll look on the far left, you'll see the probability of area of coverage at the bottom. On the y-axis, you'll see the various speeds. And then on the right, you'll see indoor, which is indoor with a handheld, outdoor, which is outdoor with a handheld, vehicle, which is green, and that represents a vehicle. Somebody with a handheld inside a vehicle, likely you will have body loss or loss from the vehicle that's surrounding you. And then the last two are more robust user equipment in a vehicle with an antenna or with a high-powered device in a vehicle. And so there you're seeing, if you notice in the first column, where we're achieving that at a minimum 90%, even indoor, 90% of probability of coverage at that 640 meg down and 64.64 meg up. And then if you see across the rest of the graphs that we are really achieving almost 90% coverage, probability of coverage, even in those other venue types across the different bandwidth speeds that you're going to see potentially on the network. If you step through the next series of slides, it addresses it. Not only initially was the dense urban, but you'll see urban, next to suburban, rural cluttered, and then last rural open. So as we mentioned, there aren't buildings in rural open, so we aren't really concerned about that, but we do achieve almost an 80% probability of coverage outdoor with a handheld, even with that lower performance.
So FirstNet Colorado sent out a request for data submission to assist with the data collection objectives and for the submission to FirstNet. So I'm going to step you through some of the information that was collected. As we went through, we asked what the data usage per device per month is. And as you can see on an aggregated level, Colorado's first responders, we're at an average of 2.64 gigabytes per device per month, which falls right along with the average of consumers. And again, with the cost of service, we were looking at public safety versus the consumer. And as you can see on the right-hand side, the composite of the Colorado public safety entities was at $47.12, which falls right along with the consumers as well at $46.64 on an aggregated level. So as you can see, public safety and consumers are paying just about the same amount for their services. And then for staffing ratios in public safety entities, we looked at full-time staffing, part-time volunteers, and then vehicles per public safety entity. And as you can see, full-time is the most at 53%, moving along to part-time at 30%, and volunteers at 17%. And then this graph here can show you quite a bit if we just break it down. This is the device per person ratio on the left-hand side, and then broken out to provided by the public safety entity. We have voice plus data devices per person, data only devices per person, and other devices per person. And these are all aggregated on a level. On the far right-hand side, you can see that it averages out to be about 1.27 devices per vehicle when the user is in the public or in the vehicle. So this will be, for example, you would have maybe a laptop, a tablet, and a cell phone in one vehicle, or maybe just a cell phone and a tablet. And these all across the board in Colorado average to 1.2 devices per vehicle. So next we looked at the applications that are used by public safety entities. As you can see, general connectivity and communications were utilized 100% by all of the public safety entities that responded. Then it moves along to computer-aided dispatch, database access, internet VPN, reporting, and down the line for different kinds of application usage, all the way down to telemetry on the right-hand side. As you can see, again, computer-aided dispatch and database access are two of the next most popular accesses. And an interesting one to note is the video usage is only about 36% on the respondents, which we believe in the future will gain more popularity and increase in usage.
So here's the highlights on our demand forecast. The next slide will just show you what we plan to step through here briefly. Demand means number of first responders and those types of devices that they have, the amount of usage in gigabytes and minutes, and number of public safety entities, which is the terminology that FirstNet is using. And then the demand changes over time, and then the variations by location. So here, one question when we asked who are the first responders or the public safety entities, we found that it was a very broad question. So we started with the national statistics and what is generally thought of your fire, law enforcement, EMS, dispatch or your PSAP, and then emergency management. So we thought of those in the traditional term. However, those of us here at FirstNet, we have backgrounds in public safety, and we know that it's not just that specific grouping. So as we've gone out around the state, we wanted to make sure that the counties told us, who do you define as a public safety entity? Who are those first responders that need to be in there? And so that could be expanded out, as you'll see in this graph here, that it included utilities, transportation, education, and I don't need to read all of them, but you can see that it's expanded out to whatever our counties are telling us is important. So this is a comparison of a couple of different data sets of police, fire, and EMS. And as you can see, the composite view gives us a larger number of responders, which it should. And although responders don't use the network with the same intensity, it does give us a good starting place. And here is a view of the number of responders. So you have a category of responder on the left and a forecast that actually takes you out to 2032, which is actually that second renewal period for FirstNet. This gives you a snapshot of the same data, but it is broken down county by county. And this just captures where the responders are. Good news is that in the larger county, this should be very indicative of where things are. But in a county with a small population, which a lot of our counties here in Colorado are small, it may not, it may be off just a little bit in the excess capacity in the network. But the excess capacity in these areas will actually be huge. And so we think that either way, this is going to be fine for planning, and this is a good basis. And again, as we've said, we want to continue to get data. So as you have data, please get it to us. And then here you'll just see this is public safety entities, responders by county. And then on this is here is more on the number of devices given to people and in vehicles, and you can see those ratios there. And here we have the devices per person and how many voice only, and then how many voice and data. So we took a combination of information that we got in our research base, and we also dimensioned the growth to see, to see in the commercial markets. So one of the trends in the commercial cellular is the number of devices per person is growing year after year. And this is because people get new devices and have multiple devices, and our public safety entities and first responders are no different. They're continually upgrading those devices. And in terms of usage, we have this slide for gigabytes per month. And here we have the forecasting in gigabytes and minutes that are used based on devices across the spectrum in voice and data. And then some of this stuff that we've gone over, particularly could be this slide. If any of this doesn't make complete sense, we are available and you can contact any one of us. You can find all of our information at www.firstnetcolorado.org. But let's just step through this quickly. There have been discussions all across the country about the usage of body cameras. And we believe this use case is going to represent a good opportunity to look at casual use compared to if we were to stream a lot more robustly. Although body cams are a rapidly changing environment, if we take a look at streaming video, we can get some idea about the cost per gigabyte to the end user and the organization, which, the bottom line, that's what it comes down to. Our decisions are based on the economics. So obviously, most agree that video doesn't need to be streamed 24/7, and most of what is recorded can be recorded on the device and recalled later if there's some sort of incident that needs to be pulled up. However, there are going to be those moments when the PSAP or that dispatch center or even command structure is going to want to have that live feed. So we provided this slide so that you can get an idea of the cost comparison to gigabytes used for video streaming in real time. So here is an analysis and taking the base of all responders, and we allowed for video streaming so many hours per day and asked what would be the network load and the cost associated with that load to the network. And there are a couple of things. First is the very sensitive to the quality of the data stream. The high quality data stream here is 20 times the data rate of a lower stream. Also, in terms of cost, at a very low end, something that could be captured even in our forecast. However, if it was used very heavily, this is one application that could essentially bring down the network, or the cost would just be unthinkable to stream large amounts of data in intensive volume of video. So we provide this comparison to help leaders and our stakeholders who are considering using streaming video in the future, gives them a cost analysis of usage. And we hope that is helpful. And again, we would like to hear your thoughts on this as we work through this case study and other case studies that are going to come up with first responders. So please engage in the process every chance you get. And then, so next steps, we like to always leave you with what is next. And so we ask that if you would schedule a coverage objectives review meeting for your county, tribe, or agency. We will come and do a presentation with some similar data, obviously in an updated format. But we want to have a robust discussion with you about how this information impacts your county. And we want to answer all those questions so that you can ramp up and get ready with the right questions and understanding of what FirstNet's going to mean for your county. And if you're interested, you can obtain the FirstNet Colorado GIS files that we've used to support this review, and you can verify the county coverage objectives. So please contact us again, and we'll get that to you. And if you haven't already done so, complete the agency data collection form that John was talking about earlier. We still want that information about how your county or your agency, how many users you have, what kind of devices, service plans, and those barriers that you might have to adoption. And we only received about half of the CAD data to support the additional coverage objectives verification. So if you can provide that information for us, that would be extremely helpful. And then if you haven't already done it, sign up for our monthly FirstNet Colorado newsletter to keep current on all activities. We know that you're very busy, and so we're not going to belabor you with a lot of useless data. We try to pinpoint the things that we think you're going to be interested in. And just please understand, this is an ongoing negotiation with FirstNet. And in 2016, we will be very busy, and your input in 2016 is very critical as we move forward. We want to thank you for your time. And again, please contact us with any comments or questions at www.firstnetcolorado.org. And then again, please read our disclaimer, which is standard in all of our presentations. Thank you.